Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'd spent years working in my garden ever since Grandpa showed me how to plant my first sunflower. I remember how he'd say his little motto every time we'd dig into the earth together, something about letting your roots run deep and your soul bloom. My garden, a patchwork of vibrant colors and sweet scents, was more than just a hobby. It was a piece of my heart, the one place where everything made sense. One morning I was out there, dirt under my nails, sun on my back, when my neighbor from next door peeked over the fence. She told me my roses looked divine, her voice sweet and admiring. I grinned, handing her a few cuttings, and told her to spread the joy around the neighborhood. Life was simple then, just me and my blooms. My garden was my sanctuary. There were tulips that danced in the breeze, marigolds that shone like little suns, and a cherry tree I'd babied since it was a twig. I'd spend hours out there, sometimes with a beer in hand, just watching life buzz and flutter around me. Every plant had a story. Every corner held a memory of Grandpa's teachings. But that peace shattered the day I found a letter from the Homeowners Association wedged in my mailbox. It was like finding a snake in my Eden. The letter was all fancy words and legal jargon, but the message was clear as day. My garden didn't fit their so-called standards. I crumpled the letter right there on my porch, muttering that their standards were nonsense. How dare they? This was my property, my life's work. But the letters kept coming, each one more threatening than the last. They talked about fines and compliance, about how my garden wasn't up to class. Not up to class. That hurt more than any fine ever could. I remember walking over to the association president, a man as rigid as his starched collars. I told him my garden was none of his business. He just smiled that smug smile of his and said that rules were rules and I'd either comply or pay up. I walked away, fists clenched, fuming. The fines started small but piled up like autumn leaves. Each new notice from the association felt like a slap in the face. I find them taped to my front door, reminding me all the time that my little paradise was under siege. I tossed each one into the trash, unopened. Money-grubbing vultures, the lot of them. My friends said I should just pay up, avoid trouble. But it wasn't about the money, it was about principle, about defending the little patch of earth that meant the world to me. This garden was all I had left of Grandpa, all I had left of simpler times. The feud with the president wasn't new. We had history, dating back to when he'd moved into the neighborhood. He'd always been a stickler for rules, once reporting me for a fence that was supposedly 2 inches too high. One evening, nursing a beer on my porch, I reminisced about our first clash. He complained about my fence blocking his view. I'd shot back, asking him what view exactly. The sky? Thinking about it now, I realized this garden war wasn't just about flowers. It was an old grudge, blossoming into something ugly. Then I discovered it wasn't just about the garden at all. There was talk of the association planning something big, something that involved tearing down the older houses for new developments. My property was right in the thick of it. I remember chatting with the guy who owned the corner store. He rang up my groceries and told me it was all about money, that my garden was just the first domino. Just a way to provoke me into making a mistake so they could hang their nooses around my neck. That night, lying in bed, I thought about it. My garden wasn't just in the president's way. It was in the way of their grand plans. This was bigger than I thought. And I was just one person standing against a machine. The morning the bulldozer came, it felt surreal. I was sipping my coffee when I heard the rumble. Rushing outside, I saw the president, perched atop a bulldozer like a king on his throne, heading straight for my garden. I yelled at him to stop, screaming that he couldn't do this. He just sneered at me. I watched in horror when the bulldozer's blade sliced through my tulips, my marigolds, my cherry tree. It was like watching a part of me being torn away. I felt something snap inside, something primal and desperate. In a daze, I went back inside and grabbed my rifle. I needed to make a stand to protect what was mine. Looking back, I know it was reckless, but in that moment, all I could think about was stopping him. I walked back out, rifle in hand, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I shouted at him to get off my land, my voice shaking with rage and desperation. He kept going, oblivious or uncaring. That's when I fired. It was meant to be a warning shot, just something to make him stop and listen. But unfortunately, it took a piece of his ear. Blood, screams, chaos everywhere. The next thing I knew, police were cuffing me, reading me my rights. My garden was ruined, and so it seemed was my life. The arrest was a blur. Questions, fingerprints, a cell that smelled like old sweat and desperation. My lawyer was a decent woman who became a godsend during those dark days. She assured me we'd fight this, that I was defending my property and had a case. The trial was a circus. The media loved the garden gun woman story. They called me. I sat there in a suit that felt too tight, listening to the president's exaggerated account of the so-called attack. He made it sound like I tried to murder him in cold blood. But my lawyer was brilliant. She painted a picture of a woman pushed to the brink, defending her home against corporate greed. She showed the jury who these people really were. The trial dragged on, each day a battle. The association had their lawyers, slick men in slicker suits. But my lawyer was relentless, chipping away at their story, revealing their plans for the neighborhood, exposing every dirty secret they'd tried to hide. Witnesses came and went. My neighbor spoke about my character, about my garden. She told everyone it was a piece of art, something beautiful and precious. The jury saw the photos of my garden before and after. The before shots showed a paradise. The after shots showed a wasteland, a crime scene of destruction. It was a fight for justice, for every little person who'd ever been stepped on by the big boots of greed. The verdict came on a sunny afternoon. Not guilty, the courtroom erupted. But all I could think about was my garden, about starting over and rebuilding what they'd destroyed. Later, my lawyer advised me to file a lawsuit against the association. We did, eventually scoring a hefty $100,000 in compensation. It was bittersweet. It couldn't bring back my cherry tree or the years of love poured into that soil. But it was a start, a chance to rebuild and honor Grandpa's memory. Months later, my garden was blooming again. It wasn't the same yet, but it was alive and growing. Neighbors stopped by, some to apologize, others to admire what I'd recreated from the ashes. My neighbor told me I'd done something amazing here. I smiled and said I was just letting my roots run deep, the way Grandpa taught me. She looked excited suddenly and asked if I'd heard the news. I asked her what she meant. She told me the association had been disbanded, her voice full of satisfaction. Turns out the trial had exposed more than just the injustice against my garden. Evidence came to light about mismanaged funds, secret deals, and the association's push for unnecessary fines to bolster their own agendas. The community was outraged, and rightfully so. The final blow came at the emergency neighborhood meeting. It was held at the local community center, a place usually reserved for bake sales and bingo nights. One by one, residents stood up and shared their stories, their frustrations with the association, and how they'd been bullied and threatened. When it came time to vote on the future of the association, the result was unanimous. The association was to be disbanded, effective immediately. Legal actions were to be taken to ensure that former board members would face what was coming for their actions. The president became a ghost of the community. Last I heard, he'd moved away, probably to terrorize some other neighborhood with his rigid rules and greedy schemes. I needed a job that would work around my college schedule, and this ice cream franchise was willing to be flexible with my hours. Our location isn't just ice cream though. We're a full fast food restaurant that happens to have an ice cream section, which means we get hit just as hard as any burger place during dinner rush. My station is the ice cream counter. I handle everything cold and sweet, soft serve cones, blended drinks, sundaes, parfaits, and the baked treats we keep warm under heat lamps. The job itself isn't terrible. What makes it bearable is my co-workers. We've become like a weird little family over these months, the kind that can communicate entire conversations through eye contact alone during the dinner rush. The headset is basically attached to my ear during every shift. Even though I'm working ice cream, I need to hear the drive-through orders coming in so I can stay ahead of things. When someone orders a blizzard or a sundae, I need to know about it right away so I can time everything correctly. Good drive-through times are everything in fast food. Our district manager watches those numbers like a hawk. Most nights are predictable. Friday and Saturday evenings get crazy, but we handle it. We've got our rhythm down. Then there are nights like this one. It was a Thursday, which should have been manageable, but we got hit with a rush that came out of nowhere. The drive-through line wrapped around the building. Every car seemed to be ordering for an entire family reunion. My partner and I were hustling, cranking out ice cream orders as fast as our hands could move. The only silver lining was that the front counter was dead, so at least we only had to worry about drive-through. I was 3 orders deep when I heard the woman's voice come through my headset. She rattled off her food order to our drive-through guy: burgers, fries, the usual stuff. Then she added one of our parfaits. For anyone who doesn't know, our parfaits are pretty straightforward. We layer soft-serve ice cream with hot fudge and peanuts in a cup. The hot fudge is the key ingredient that makes it actually taste good, instead of just being ice cream with nuts. It's also what makes the bottom layer of ice cream start to soften. I made a mental note of her parfait order but didn't rush to start it. We were still working through the orders ahead of hers, and I had learned early on not to make ice cream stuff too far in advance. Nothing worse than having a melted sundae sitting there waiting. That's when her voice came through the headset again, dripping with attitude. She told our drive-through person not to dare make that parfait until she got to the window. She complained that every time she came here, the parfait was always completely melted. I paused mid-scoop on someone else's cone. The tone in her voice was like nails on a chalkboard. Not a polite request, not even a firm request. It was a command, delivered like she was talking to incompetent children. My manager's voice came through next, using that overly sweet customer service voice she reserves for difficult people. She suggested that if the woman wanted, we could replace the hot fudge with cold fudge, because the hot fudge was what made the ice cream melt. It was a perfectly reasonable solution. Cold fudge wouldn't melt the ice cream nearly as fast. The parfait would stay intact longer. Problem solved. The woman's response made everyone on headset wince. She said no in the most offended tone imaginable, like my manager had just asked her if she wanted us to spit in her food. She insisted she wanted it normal, as if having cold fudge instead of hot was the most ridiculous suggestion anyone had ever made. I looked at my partner, who had stopped mid-blend on a smoothie. Through the window into the main area, I could see our drive-through guy's shoulders tense. My manager stood near the grill, her expression carefully neutral. Here's the thing. If this woman had just asked nicely, I would have busted my butt for her. I would have told our drive-through guy to give me a heads up the second her car pulled forward so I could make that parfait fresh and fast. She would have gotten the best parfait we'd ever made. Still cold, barely melted at all. But she didn't ask nicely. She talked to my co-workers like they were stupid, like they were beneath her. And everyone on headset was thinking the exact same thing. I could feel it in the silence that followed her response. She wanted it made when she got to the window. Fine, we'd make it when she got to the window. I continued working on the orders ahead of hers at my normal pace. Through the headset, I could hear her car moving forward in line. The car ahead of her had ordered half the menu from the grill section, so she sat there waiting. 5 minutes passed, maybe more. Finally, our drive-through guy's voice came through. He told me she was at the window. I took a deep breath and moved into slow motion mode. I walked to grab a parfait cup like I was wading through honey. I selected the perfect cup, examining it carefully. I moved to the ice cream machine and dispensed the first layer of soft serve with the speed of a glacier. My partner caught my eye and smirked. He knew exactly what I was doing. I could see through the window that her food was already bagged up and ready. Our drive-through guy handed it to her with his standard smile. She took it, but I could see her looking past him, clearly waiting for her parfait. I added the hot fudge to the cup with deliberate, careful precision. Let it pool just right. Added the peanuts one at a time. Well, not really one at a time, but I took my sweet time counting out the right amount. Then another layer of ice cream, even slower than the first. I smoothed the top like I was frosting a wedding cake. By the time I handed the parfait to our drive-through guy, I'd spent a solid minute and a half making it. The woman had been sitting at that window, food in hand, waiting specifically for this parfait. He passed it through to her with the same pleasant smile he gave everyone. She took it without a word and drove off. When her car disappeared around the corner, my partner burst out laughing. He told me that what I'd just done was beautiful. My manager chimed in with a grin saying she didn't see anything. The thing is, that parfait probably still melted by the time she got home. The hot fudge was already working on the bottom layer when it left my hands. But at least it wasn't completely melted when she received it, which was technically what she asked for. Was it petty? Absolutely. Did she technically get exactly what she requested? Also yes. The drive-through line had cleared out while I was making her parfait, so at least no one else got stuck waiting because of my little act of malicious compliance. We got slammed again about 10 minutes later, but that's just how it goes in fast food. My co-workers brought it up for weeks afterward. Whenever someone got snippy about their ice cream, someone would inevitably mention making it at the window and we'd all crack up. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, and I'd always dreamed of something intimate when it came to getting married. Last spring, I packed up my entire life and moved across the ocean to be with my fiancée. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once, leaving behind everything familiar for this new chapter. We'd originally planned to elope, just the two of us exchanging vows, somewhere quiet and meaningful. But then reality set in. My grandmother wasn't getting any younger, and his grandfather had been talking about how he wanted to see his grandson get married before he passed. These were people who'd shaped our lives, who deserved to witness this moment. So we changed our plans and created a tiny guest list, maybe 15 people total, all the nearest and dearest souls in our lives. My friend back home somehow caught wind of our updated plans. We've been close for years, shared countless late-night conversations and inside jokes. When she asked about the wedding, she sounded so hopeful, almost wistful. I told her it was going to be really small, just immediate family and a couple of close friends. I explained there would be no plus ones for anyone, but I'd love for her to be there if she could make it. She said it sounded beautiful and that she'd be honored to attend. But a few days later, she brought up her boyfriend. I'd met him exactly twice at group gatherings, where we'd maybe exchanged 10 words total. Nice enough guy, I supposed, but essentially a stranger to me. She told me her boyfriend had this thing about being left out of events and that he got really upset about it. The way she said it made my stomach drop, like she was preparing me for something. I explained that no one was getting a +1, and even my fiancé's brother wasn't bringing his girlfriend of 3 years. I asked her to just explain that to him and said it was nothing personal. I mentioned something about budget constraints and keeping things small, trying to soften the message. That turned out to be a massive mistake. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text that made my heart sink into my shoes. She'd written this long message about how they'd both budgeted for the trip, how they'd make the timeline work with their schedules, how he insisted on covering after-party expenses. The message ended with her already looking at tickets and trains and lodging, telling me to send more details as I got them. She said they loved us both and were going to be there. How had my clear boundary turned into an invitation for her boyfriend? My hands were actually shaking when I typed back. I told her not to book anything yet since we hadn't even booked anything ourselves. I said I'd keep her updated but asked if she'd talked to him about what I told her. I tried to explain again that it was only people we knew really well, and while I didn't not want to get to know him, it was a very small wedding with just a few of our closest people. I admitted my heart was racing. What I should have said was that he wasn't welcome for any of it, not the ceremony, not the photos, not the dinner, not the entire weekend. But I was so flustered that I didn't spell it out clearly enough. Her response came quick. She said they wouldn't book yet and that she was just price checking. Then she said he'd offered to sit out the ceremony or reception if that was my concern, but that it was more about traveling together. She claimed he'd been to weddings where his partners weren't invited, and he understood. She assured me they'd pay for themselves, stand in the back, eat beforehand, whatever we needed. The message ended with how they wanted to celebrate me and my fiancé and our love. Except this man had met me twice and didn't know my fiancé at all. How exactly was he celebrating our love? I didn't respond for over a week. My fiance and I talked it over endlessly. He was baffled that a near stranger thought he had any place at our intimate wedding. His sister's fiance wasn't even coming, and they've been together for 5 years. Finally, I sent her a message asking if we could schedule a phone call to clarify some things about my wedding. Now I'm sitting here minutes before I have to make this call, rehearsing what I'm going to say. It's not just a ceremony. It's the photos afterward where we're all going to multiple meaningful locations around the city. It's the dinner where I want to look around the table and see only faces of people who've shaped my life. It's the entire weekend, really, celebrating this huge transition with my inner circle. I've realized I need to be completely direct. No more hinting, no more softening the message because I'm afraid of hurting feelings. Tonight I'm going to tell her that her boyfriend is not invited to anything. Not the ceremony, not the photos, not the dinner, not any activity we have planned for that weekend. If she chooses to bring him on the trip anyway, that's her decision, but he cannot participate in a single wedding-related event. I'm also going to tell her about the big celebration we're planning back home this summer, a casual party where everyone who couldn't make the wedding can celebrate with us. He'll absolutely be invited to that, but this weekend, this is sacred to me. My phone timer just went off. Time to make the call. I dialed her number, my heart pounding. She picked up sounding excited and said she'd been looking at flights and thought they'd found some good options. I took a deep breath and told her I needed to be completely honest because I didn't think I was clear enough before. I said her boyfriend was not invited to my wedding or any of the events that weekend at all. Silence filled the line. I continued explaining I was having an intimate wedding with only people I was extremely close to. I mentioned that even my fiance's sister's longtime partner wasn't coming. I said this wasn't about budget anymore or logistics, that I didn't know her boyfriend well enough to have him at what might be the most meaningful day of my life. I apologized if it sounded harsh, but said I needed her to understand this boundary. Her voice came back cold when she asked if I was saying that if she came, he had to just sit in a hotel room all weekend. I clarified that he wasn't invited to the wedding activities and what they did outside of that was their choice. I told her we were having a big party back home this summer where he'd absolutely be welcome. But this weekend was only for my closest people, and he wasn't one of them. More silence hung between us. She said she needed to think about whether she was even coming then. I told her that was completely her choice and I'd understand whatever she decided, but I needed to know by next Friday so I could finalize plans. She hung up without saying goodbye. My fiancé hugged me afterward and told me I did the right thing. We'll see if she comes or not. Either way, I protected what matters most. This one perfect day surrounded only by the people who've earned their place in my heart. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.